So I'm Tony Heaton. You may have seen my business card says that I'm from Kaseya. So I just want to make sure that I can clear that up for you. So I'm here representing Unitrends, which is actually a Kaseya company. Kaseya is the umbrella organisation. Today we're going to be talking about backup and why it's the last line of defence in a cybersecurity strategy. So I'll be introducing Wayne a little bit later, who's our subject matter expert, and he'll be giving you a product demonstration for you to get your teeth in and proverbially pull it apart. I don't want to bore you with PowerPoints, but I welcome questions as well. So the cybersecurity strategy, there's been a lot of talk in the industry around security, and none more so now than some of the latest threats around ransomware, etc. So why is backup the last line of defence? Well, let's talk about what best practice actually is now in cybersecurity, what we consider best practice. It's actually 4 lines of defence. Now, we, Unitrends, as a Kaseya company, we've been around a long time now, 20 years, and we have one of the best backup and disaster recovery products in the market today. We have over 30,000 customers worldwide, some very good coffee table names. We are one of the fastest growing backup and recovery providers in the market today.
Kaseya is more focused, I would say, more SMB.
So the mid-market, yes.
And maybe that's because these customers are growing over than these small and medium business solutions, and that they want to go to our bigger solutions.
So you're right when you say Kaseya, because you probably would recall Kaseya from the remote management monitoring tools like the VSA or the VSA.
As you are in the constellation,
yeah.
I could intuit that you have the same focus.
Okay, so let me just address. So Unitrends backup is an enterprise class backup product. It can scale into the enterprise. But you're absolutely right when you're talking about Kaseya, and the wider strategy that we have is focused very much on the mid-enterprise, the mid-market. Why do we do that? Well, it's about that multifunction IT user. So if you're talking about a Citibank or a HSBC, I mean, they will have teams that look after backup. They'll have teams that look after networking. In fact, they'll have teams that look specifically after packet analysis within networking. The mid-market can't do that. So they have the multifunction IT user that looks after everything. The more generalist as opposed to specialists. And that's why Unitrends is a very good fit within the wider Kaseya portfolio, and targeting specifically into that mid-market, that multifunction IT user. So, today, we've got over an exabyte of business critical information being protected. Over 100 petabytes in our own cloud. And as we mentioned, the 98% customer satisfaction rating, this is what our customers are telling us. They're very happy with our products, and the fact that they're not moving away in the droves will be testimony to that. We're going to talk about some of the challenges around backup and disaster recovery, and of course the cost-saving ways that we as Unitrends eliminate. As an organisation, you can see that we've got a lot of, I mentioned coffee table names, so names that you would recognise, GE, Boeing, Novartis, and to name a few. I think manufacturing, we've got New Balance there. I would prefer to put them in sports, but manufacturing, I'll go along with that. We have, in summary, why do these companies choose us? And you can see that there are some enterprise level customers there that do require a solution that scales. So why do they choose us? Well, the dedicated backup and our DR expertise that we have, We save time and resources via automation. So our solutions are extremely easy to use, very intuitive, which I'm sure you'll see later. It's advanced continuity. So we're talking about both local and cloud disaster recovery. One of our, we could consider unique selling points is the automation around testing, and we can audit it with SLAs as well, because if you're talking about backup and disaster recovery, it's only any good if you can actually recover. And if it seems like common sense, but I go out and speak to customers that are actually using the product. I speak to prospects that are looking to move to our solution. And the amount of customers I speak to, and I ask them, do you do fire drills? Do you test? How often? And they just don't have the resources to do it. It's their idea of testing is put a damn finger in the air and hope for the best. So we take that pain away from them, and we automate that process for them so that they have the assurance that they can recover in the event of a requirement from a disaster or data loss. It probably comes as no surprise that the biggest cause of data loss is human error. It can be malicious, but in most cases it is exactly that, through either a lack of training, lack of understanding, or just pure ignorance, or somebody's not quite getting enough sleep maybe. Human error accounts for almost a quarter of all data loss. When you actually look at what you see in the press, you know, talking about earthquakes, we're talking about floods, we're talking about typhoons and hurricanes, it only actually accounts for 4% of downtime in the data centers. The rest is attributable to software, hardware failures, misconfigured applications, power outages. Now, power outage, I suppose, could come from a natural disaster, but then we've got an on-site disaster, so what could be constituted to an on-site disaster? Someone drilling through a power cable could cause a power outage. It could be something very, very bananas there. Then we've got the area I'm going to concentrate a little more on here, which is viruses and malware, which is growing in threat.
Especially in Florida.
Everywhere. Everywhere. But you also get the natural disasters in Florida. You get the hurricanes. I think they're trying to architect into that though. So I mentioned at the beginning the four-layered, multi-layered approach to security. When I first entered the industry, it was for a technology house in Ireland, and they were geared around security. Primarily, we're talking about endpoint protection and network protection. So edge and then device. Everything else that was their approach to security. Everything else was then ancillary. Things have changed, things have moved on, and that's 20 years ago. So technology's moved on. I think that's the one constant in the industry is change. So now, to mitigate threats, you really need to have a multi-layered approach to security. First line of defense, what we consider table stakes. If you speak to any of the vendors, and I'm sure you do in the security space, they'll tell you antivirus, anti-malware, a firewall at the gateway. This is a commodity now. This is must-have. Firewall, it scans the data, traffic coming in. Antivirus actually opens the packets and checks for signatures or behaviors. First line of defense, it's been around a long time. I actually worked for one guy that brought Dr. Solomon's into Europe about 30 years ago. Actually, one of the very first antivirus technologies. Things have changed a long time since, a lot since then. If you're just talking about edge security, they will do the majority of the heavy lifting, if you will. They'll do a lot of the obvious threat protection. But they're not going to do everything. What you're finding now in today's age, computers aren't always locked down. In fact, with bring your own device, you may find that computers on your network aren't even yours. So then you've got someone actually adding network devices without your knowledge. I've seen that quite a bit. Someone gets a little, one of these MiFi routers, sticks it into a wired socket, and they've got their own Wi-Fi. It's quite scary when people don't realise the threats that they're opening up to their own network. When you're adding changes, it creates a lot of excess noise on the network as well. Garbage here, if you will, but in terms of network setting. And then you've got, going back to one of the earlier slides, end user errors. So that can be down to configurations. What you've also got to do is never assume that the network is constant, because it does change. It always changes. You never know who's logging on at any one time, who wasn't logged on when you last looked at it. The network changes regularly, throughout the day, every day. So what do? We've gone past the gateway. If the threats have got past the gateway, we've got to look at the second layer. You've got to secure the devices that are on the network. Secure your endpoints, workstations, PCs, tablets, phones. Kaseya, we talked about Kaseya earlier, and the Virtual Systems Administrator, which is a remote management and monitoring tool. This addresses this need. Patch management, technician remote access. How do we get into an endpoint? How do we make sure it's configured? How do we actually automate all of that in terms of deploying patches? Servers, similar sort of thing. We've got to protect the applications that are on the servers. So this is where we start talking about Unitrends, data backup, remote file storage. Can we get instant recovery? If we lose a mailbox on Exchange, can we get it back up before the user actually notices? If we talk about malware, configuring your endpoints is extremely important. There was a case earlier this year, the Arizona Beverages ransomware attack. Over 200 servers and computers were paralysed within the organisation. What was kind of tongue-in-cheek was the computers all displayed the same message from a ransomware point of view. Your network was hacked and encrypted. That was all. What it found is that the ransomware affected companies' Windows-powered Exchange server. It knocked out email across the entire company. Its other operating systems weren't affected, such as Unix, such as Mac. But the outbreak left the company pretty much paralysed. They didn't have computers for the majority of the users to process customer orders. In fact, they actually started a couple of days into the attack. They started processing orders manually. One source said they were losing millions of dollars a day. I won't tell you the expletives they used. So what happens with patch management? Well, a typical remote management and monitoring solution such as Kaseya's VSA, it ensures the endpoints are consistently protected based on policy. So it will roll out patches based on policy, it will roll out signatures and updates from anti-malware and antivirus programs. You can also report on that to make sure and keep compliance. By having it based on policy, and reporting against that policy as well. You can set different policies based on user group and different access based on user group as well. So by device type, role, location, and that way you're minimizing the risk to your network. What we say about patch management as one of the key fundamentals in second line of defense is automate scans to run regularly across the environment. Automate the patch compliance. Make sure that your systems on your network are compliant with the latest operating systems, the latest patches, so it minimizes any vulnerabilities that can be exploited. This also includes third-party software, anything else that's installed on there. And of course, Apple Mac is becoming more proliferant throughout industry. We say once a month patch deployment. It asks users to do a restart once it's done. Servers do scheduled reboots to minimize downtime. And any kind of blackout windows are configured so they don't operate at any disruptive moments to the organization. Mention Mac because, go back a few years, Windows was the one that was being exploited, it was being attacked all the time, but it's not just Windows. It was only Windows that was being exploited and targeted all the time because it had the widest install base. The reason that Mac is now getting under increased attack is because Mac is now pretty much everywhere in every environment. So they're now as vulnerable as Windows, purely down to the number of attacks that they get. If you look at where the attacks are coming from, may not even be the OS. It could be the applications that are installed on the OS. So they also need updates and patches. This tends to be a very laborious process unless you can automate it. Automation is cool. It's absolutely critical. If you can't automate tasks like this, then it can cost literally thousands in every organisation, just on man-hours. So when you've got your endpoint secure, the latest threat is coming from the dark web. Intrusion prevention, you might have heard of. Dark web is a new concept. A lot of people aren't actually getting to know this. They're actually frightened of it. The deep web, the dark web, you call it what you want. What you tend to find is that most attacks are non-discriminate. They will probe for vulnerabilities that they can exploit. They're not spear phishing after a specific organisation. They're not spear phishing for a specific vulnerability. It's quite sweeping. So what will happen is that the hackers will employ a zombie network of machines to mass probe for vulnerabilities across organizations. What will happen is they will find that these probes may find that a server's not been patched. As a result, there's a vulnerability that they can then exploit. We also find that we can get an intruder in there, find out what they're doing. Behavioural analysis. We now look at dark web monitoring to find out when assets, login data, password, usernames, when it's been stolen or offered for sale, you'd be surprised. We've had very recently, Kaseya acquired a company called ID Agent, who does exactly this. And they came to us originally wanting to partner with us, and were able to show us the vulnerabilities on the dark web in terms of our users and their access to our network.
Some question around that.
Okay.
How do you adapt? Because even especially on the dark web, hackers are totally changing the methods to protect their marketplace and their forums. It means that they use, for example, kind of technology as blockchain today.
Yeah.
Cooptation. It means that if you're not a friend, you can't go on. How do you manage to go on and to become a node of a bad guy's blockchain, or to be a friend to the bad guys?
Okay, so what you tend to find is that the hacks are based on sweeping in indiscriminate approach, as I said. So they're not spear phishing. If you're going the more secure areas of the darknet that's only allowing access to minimal people, it's not profitable for them. So when they have information to sell, they want to open it up to as many people as possible, so that we've got as much chance to sell it to as possible. And that's what's actually happening.
It depends the kind of data. Yes, if it's a number of a million of mail address.
Yeah.
Yes, it is very critical information on a new product or a new patent. I'm not sure that they were going to open it largely, but just maybe to the people that can pay for it.
Well, if that's the case, I hear what you're saying there, but in terms of credential and access to an organisation for credentials and passwords and logins, that tends to be very generic data that they're trying to sell for harvesting of data and accessing to it. So they tend to open that up to the widest bidder. ID Agent, which is our technology that does this dark web monitoring, it has access to a lot of the markets, like Silverhawk, for example, that they used to be the big one, and it would scan the dark web in very short time for credentials based on domain. If you go back a couple of years, I think it was, the Equifax hack, what you found is that 147 million records, personally identifiable records, were breached by Equifax. What they're saying is it was open season on that organisation, but people didn't realise right away. It was hacked, it was breached, and the bomb was left in waiting before it was discovered. So what actually happened? I mean, we're talking about 147 million individuals. That's almost equivalent to half the population of the USA. That's a lot of information that's breached. It's probably one of the biggest data breaches in history. And Equifax still haven't recovered reputation-wise since then. We're talking about what they actually got. We got the names, addresses, phone numbers, insurance details, national insurance details. A lot of this information can be used to steal identities, create new identities based on that. How did it happen? Well, as I said, they weren't specifically targeting Equifax as such, it was non-discriminate. They found the vulnerabilities in their edge servers. Then, whilst they were looking for information, they were able to then get login credentials by exploiting those vulnerabilities. By using those login credentials that they were then exploited, they were able to get deeper and deeper onto the network. Until 76 days after the initial breach, they're extracting information still. They're doing it covertly, slowly, almost invisibly. What they got was 51 databases across that 71 days, or 76 days, sorry.
So, do we actually have any understanding of the impact though? Because just because they managed to steal half the data of the US in terms of the population size. Unless that really translates into something where we can show a spike of fraudulent activity that was driven from that behaviour, then who cares?
It's a very good question. So there's a number of different areas there. Is okay, in terms of fraudulent activity, how many addresses were used in terms of cloning information, how many fake IDs were made using those drivers' credentials. It's a very difficult thing to measure. It is a very
But the banks must know, because they know how much fraudulent activity they deal with on a day-to-day basis.
The banks,
How much
yes.
money there is. So the banks must know what the impact of that event was to them. Do you think that somebody would say, well, let's actually just quantify this?
That's a very good. Do you know what? I'll ask that question and see if there is a quantifiable measure other than the fines imposed on Equifax for this. But in terms of the measure, what did the hackers get out of it? Estimated value, very good question. I'll find out for you. We're looking at internal security. I mentioned there's 76 days since the first breach was detected with Equifax. What you find is that today, I go back to the early 90s. Hackers used to be individuals. They used to be all about notoriety. They wanted their name. They even put their own signatures on viruses that they would just to cause disruption. They were all about fame and notoriety. Now it's all covert. Now it's big business. So now we're looking at 4/5 of security incidents that could have been prevented by firewalls or antivirus. However, when they get breached, what we're finding is the average time is 6 months before detection. So what can a hacker do on your network in 6 months? Scary thought. Intrusion detection gives an inventory of assets, looks at what they're doing in terms of monitoring what the activity on those assets. Look at behaviour, how those assets are used, behaviour of who people are logging in. If you integrate it to produce tickets for your IT, you can actually lock down any intruders as soon as they're detected. Yes?
Let's say, in this case, someone goes through, places the bomb, they can get back up. Okay. I mean, that happens in these cases.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, one explodes in an area. Everyone goes, yay, we have backup, it's no problem. There's no knowing which backup is infiltrated. First of all, you don't know that any is infiltrated to begin with. Second, you get the backup, 3 days later, bomb explodes again. So, is there a remedy to that?
Yes, and Wayne will cover some of that off as well. So we actually have natively in the Unitrends product, we look for certain behaviours that are associated with malware, in particular ransomware. So we measure the entropy of the data as well. As soon as that starts to change, then we know that there's something suspicious happening there. So I suppose it's around heuristic analysis, and we'll look at that. We do have a number of areas. We actually have native anti-malware in the product as well, which scans the data that we're backing up for known threats. But of course, the zero-day threats is what we're really looking at. So the threats that we don't have signatures for, or we don't have in there. So you're absolutely right. If the timer has been switched and the bomb goes off, and then your network is hacked, you want to go back to a previous copy of your data, or the nearest copy of your data to that isn't hacked, and that's what we do. That's how we do that. So,
And I'll show you how that's done within the product ultimately.
very good point. Very good point. Because a lot of backup vendors don't have that in their product.
Yeah, it's exactly what you said. You need some heuristics and you need to understand some machine learning to see what might be an unknown, not necessarily an issue, but just an unknown to make a difference to.
Totally. So the behavioural analysis is a big thing there. So if you see data starting to behave in a way that it shouldn't, it's usually exactly. So it's usually a good indicator that something suspicious is going on. Now you can get false positives there as well, but it's better to have a false positive than absolutely, absolutely. In fact, the FBI released some statistics around ransomware that 80% of customers that paid the ransomware to get the data back. Yeah. But of that 80%, 25, a quarter of that 80%, so 20% overall, they didn't even get the data back even after pay.
Yeah, no, that's next. Yeah,
So it's better to be protected, and prevention, as I say, is better than cure. It's better to be protected and be able to fight against it. Talking about intrusion detection software, what does intrusion detection do? I mean, of course, it can allow you to create alerts. So you get, okay, your backup's not being, your data's not being protected. Going back to what we were saying about behavioural analysis, somebody from sales has just logged on to the finance server. Somebody from marketing has just logged on to the payroll server. That's not right. So, why is somebody from sales logging onto the finance server? There's no business there. So, you can look at that and start protecting against that straight away. There's an application that you don't know, a foreign application to the environment, you don't know that's been installed somewhere. You want to shut that down, isolate it. There's been a new profile, it's just been added to the CEO's laptop. Well, why has somebody else got a profile on the boss's laptop? Really? You'd be surprised how often this does happen now. So, John just logged into the customer server at midnight. Well, coming from Kaseya, we've just had a bit of recent bit of negative press around the remote management and monitoring tool that we have, where hackers used it to spread ransomware, malware, because those MSPs weren't protected in the first instance. So they got access into that MSP's environment and used the tools there in order to distribute the malware. So you need to be protected across all points. And that, one thing that would have stopped that would have been multi-factor authentication, for example. Talk about dark web monitoring.
Can I just go back to that slide, please?
Yes.
Slide. I look at that list and I think those are the sort of things that somebody would do if they weren't very good at actually hacking the system. So, having been a mentoring guy many years ago, and having done some things I probably shouldn't have been allowed to do at the time, one thing I always made sure I did when I was breaking into something like that, was putting my track to somebody else's data. So, for instance, I wouldn't log in with a different profile. I'd log in with a profile of somebody else. So we think that in reality, that list would be a list of the sort of things that people are doing if they're just not very good at hacking. And the ones that are really good at hacking will be making sure that they never trigger any of those sort of alarms in the first place.
You're absolutely right. I'm glad you brought that up, because what you find is alerts like this, of course, your database isn't being backed up, it should be backed up. That's an alert that you would expect any IT administrator to be able to set up. If you're talking about unauthorized login, if you've got multi-factor authentication, then straight away that's going to be, something that you're going to need logging there. Of course, a new profile being added to the CEO's laptop, he might actually want a new profile being on there, he might want his PA to have access under a different profile. But in reality, it's suspicious, so you want to be able to get alerts there. You're absolutely right, these are high profile, what you would say, easy alerts to set up, but covering your tracks, and I've just mentioned, say a VSA from a remote management and monitoring tool. What actually happened on one of those instances is that they logged into the VSA using the CEO's credentials. Where did they get the credentials from?
Just a question to be clear. All these kind of features are on Unitrends.
So this is part of
on
Unitrends.
on the companion products of Kaseya.
Correct.
When the Unitrends
A quick
session is coming.
Yeah, Unitrends session is coming up short. Okay, so dark web monitoring. You mentioned, we were talking about dark web earlier in terms of the overlay networks. And this is one of the markets that's on the dark web that we monitor. And all kinds of illegal activities there are going on there. So what do? What are we scanning for? Passwords, usernames, any kind of personal identifiable information, security numbers, credit cards. We can find all of this. We can look at your domain to find out how many users within your domain have compromised credentials on the dark web that are openly up for sale or distribution. We can actually create mock phishing alerts towards your own employees that basically allows them to, let's find out who the people are actually clued in and who aren't. So one of the biggest vulnerabilities any organisation has is the people. In fact, it's probably the biggest vulnerability. And of course, awareness around security is imperative, particularly around the dark web. So the reason I'm bringing this up is we did a webinar a little while ago, and we had a number of attendees. We had their credentials in advance of the webinar. We actually ran the domains of the attendees, and almost 9 out of 10 of the attendees that came had compromised credentials in their organisation. 87%, nearly 88% of the organisations that attended, they were actively looking for information around security, and yet they'd been compromised. As you can see, almost half a billion individual accounts are already compromised. So, layer 4 protection, and this is the Unitrends piece. So, data backup and recovery is the last line of defense in any cybersecurity environment. What does it give you? Data replication, remote storage, local application recovery, verified and reassured. We can give you disaster planning, infrastructure disaster recovery in the event that an airplane crashes into your office. Can we get you back up and running and your employees working remotely? Yes, we can. How do we do that? Well, again, the table states a backup and disaster recovery. If you speak to a Veeam, if you speak to a Commvault, if you speak to any of the competitors out there, they'll talk about the 3-2-1 strategy of best practice. So 3 copies of your data, 2 media, and at least 1 of them offsite. It's what we call table stakes. It's best practice. What we can do for you is we can give you offsite replication. We'll give you that offsite straight away. Cloud-based storage up in the cloud. There's a big movement to the cloud, in particular for storage of backup for data protection. What we provide is infinite retention. Yes.
Say cloud-based storage. It's object backend as Azure Blobs or F3 AWS, which is kind of cloud-based storage. Okay,
so we look at Azure and AWS and how we operate slightly different, and Wayne will cover a little bit more about that on the demo as well later. Talk a little bit more about that later as well. But it's our own cloud as opposed to Azure or AWS, and object-based. The question was object-based.
No, it's a proprietary cloud which we've built ourselves. The object-based storage, which is essentially AWS as an example, we can leverage that as well for disaster recovery.
No, my question is which kind of cloud-based storage you offer?
Oh, yeah, so we offer basically proprietary storage built by ourselves, which is based on a number of different platforms.
Yeah, but at the end it's what? It's object, backend, it's files backend, it's what? And where?
It's storage that is consumed through a replication process, and we're going to store files essentially. Okay. Is this on actually?
Yes, that is on, but it's just not very loud. It was in the room.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah, so we replicate data from an appliance on site to our cloud, and we're going to be replicating file level / block level. So we're going to use source-side deduplication to move data from the local appliance to the cloud, and in the cloud, our cloud, we can actually reconstruct that data, be it a virtual machine that is based on VMware or Hyper-V as an example. So we can spin up workloads in our cloud for customers in the event of disaster recovery. If you want object-based storage, in terms of storing data for long-term retention, in a public cloud, we're going to support AWS, Azure, we'll support Google, etc. But that's from an archiving perspective. If you want to leverage those public clouds for disaster recovery, we also have a feature within the product which is called Boomerang that will take snapshots of virtual machines on a VMware platform, replicate them to AWS as an example, and allow you to convert those virtual machines from a VMDK file into an AMI file and spin them up in your own virtual private cloud. And that's a manual process that you'll manage yourself. With our cloud, we provide a white glove service, essentially. So we take away the pain of the customer having to do the recovery of their systems because we're providing a service which is a white glove managed service within our cloud. So that's where the value is. So we offer two different approaches. One which is fully automated and managed by us, and we offer the capability to use AWS or Azure for the customer to spin up their own workloads in their own time.
Okay, so we touched on the automated ransomware detection. If they're encrypting your information, trying to stay under the radar, we can pick that up. The artificial intelligence, the AI, we run that on every backup in terms of checking in every file, looking about the entropy of that file, looking at the information, if there's any file changes, to identify the backup. So going back to your point earlier is, are we going to restore an infected instance of the data? And this is how we prevent that from happening. So we can actually highlight when we are detecting that information during the backup as well. Don't forget Azure, O365, G Suite, Salesforce, these applications in the cloud, these workloads in the cloud also need to be backed up, and we provide solutions for that as well. Protecting public clouds, Wayne just talked about that just briefly. If you didn't get it, what we're talking about there is shared responsibility as what we've got. We can protect the workloads, the virtual appliances, and we can actually fail over to our own cloud as well. So whether that's AWS or Azure.
Yeah, so what that's essentially saying is that if customers are running workloads in AWS or Azure, we can deploy a virtual appliance in AWS or Azure to actually protect those workloads. And we can also replicate those workloads out into our cloud and provide disaster recovery services in our cloud for those customers that are solely cloud-based.
Are you actually protecting SaaS applications, or obviously for those people who may not realise that their provider is
Yeah. So if you speak to Microsoft, in fact, the disclaimer is that they will give you they guarantee access as part of their SLA. They guarantee access to their platform. They do not protect the data. That's the responsibility of the data owner. So they always recommend, Salesforce and Google have a similar disclaimer. They recommend a third-party product, because they don't do it themselves, to back up that data, to protect that information. So we can protect that. The current platforms that we protect, workloads that are cloud workloads that we protect are Office 365, G Suite, and Salesforce. And we've just been covering that, so in the interest of time, I'll pick through. So just a summary of what I've just been saying. If we're talking about the multi-layered defense against cybercrime, we're looking at security at the of endpoints, patch management, which is, say, data backup and application recovery. We look at Unitrends backup. Or if it's one of the workloads in the cloud, it's our spanning backup products. Intrusion detection, which will be the Unitrends security manager. And then of course we've got the dark and deep web monitoring from IDA. To give a full-rounded security protection.
You have a direct integration between spanning and your Unitrends?
It's not it's not direct integration. It's at the moment. We are working on that integration as we speak, and it will be here later this year. Of course, you can manage the Unitrends data protection and the spanning data protection using the Kaseya Virtual Systems Administrator.
Sorry.
One pane of glass.
Maybe I'm totally wrong, but spanning was not EMC.
Once upon a time, yes.
So they have been acquired by EMC and then they sold it to you.
So EMC sold it out, and then they had a management buyout, I think it was, and then we acquired them last year. So it wasn't, yeah, you're absolutely right there, EMC did go down that route. In fact, EMC went down the route of buying, it was about 4 or 5 different data protection products between Dell and EMC at any one time, which then became Dell Software, which in itself is now been sold off. Yeah. So, changing strategy from Dell and EMC, essentially.
I have a question. Okay, so you acquired all these companies, but you know, they are separate products, separate portals, separate processes, separate everything. So why should I, continue to buy from you? I mean, every time it's not a feature on top of the product, but it's a new product.
Okay, no, that's a very valid point. So we have this philosophy or this vision that we call IT complete. And what this essentially is giving you is a common workflow across all these products. One of the things that costs the multifunction IT user the time is going from one workflow into another to stop and then reigniting the initial workflow. So for example, if we're talking about remote management and monitoring, you have the pane of glass there that allows you to manage patches, to deploy, have remote sessions with the endpoints, to configure security or to configure software on the endpoint. By using that same tool, they are plugged in at a common layer. You can still manage the backups. You can manage the compliance, you can manage the security, you can manage antivirus and monitoring. So that's what Kaseya is building within this IT complete strategy, and it gives you that common look and feel. A bit like the way Microsoft Office is a suite. It's one common look and feel, but you still go into Excel to do spreadsheets, If you pull up a PowerPoint and you want to input
No,
a
but
spreadsheet-
if I do copy and paste on Excel spreadsheet and I put it on Word, I can still edit it.
Correct.
So what I can do here is mix backups from Unitrends and Office 365 in a single repository, for example. So I can consolidate.
If you are using the Kaseya Virtual Systems Administrator, yes you can.
Object linking and editing for backup. OLE for backup.
Yeah, but I was in it. So most of your competitors offer Office 365 as a functionality. Okay, so you have a complete view of what is happening. I mean, even if they are totally different things. So
In terms of alerts, in terms of management of that particular infrastructure, it's two different ways of protecting the data because it's two different types of
two different data, whatever you
So
want.
what
At the end of the day, it's a single product.
what
single
you're talking about
license.
is the management console to manage both. It's Virtual Systems Administrator.
Okay, so you have a virtual management console.
Yes.
What does it mean? It's management. What is
There's
it?
management console, so you can get all the alerts in one place. You can configure everything in one place. You can essentially that is your cockpit
Okay,
within your IT environment.
I see. Very good.
I'll hand over to Wayne for a more technical. I know you've been bored of me talking, so I'll hand over to Wayne for a little more technical insight.
So what I'm actually going to do is just kind of run you through the product at a very high level, and I'm going to delve into the recovery assurance in a bit more detail because that's the key feature that I think is of interest to you, and it's one of our flagship features in itself. But essentially, this is a dashboard that we provide. I'm going to reset the dashboard. This is a dashboard that we provide for customers to get visibility of what's happening within their environment when they log in. So it's a web-based interface. You can log in from anywhere, which basically is great. There's no application that you have to install on your laptop. It's just a web-based browser that you need to access this interface and access the appliance with. And once you're in the actual dashboard, what you're seeing is a set of tiles. So this is a backup summary tile. This is a storage tile. This is active jobs tile. So if there's any jobs running, you're going to see the jobs running. And you can also filter on the jobs as well. So you can choose to filter, see backup jobs running, recovery jobs running, or data copy access jobs running. Now, ultimately, what customers need to understand is basically whether they have any errors, which is the backup summary is showing us, how many systems are being protected and how many systems are not being protected. So this is all about the risk, especially in the virtualized environment where you work with an API, you discover all the virtual machines, but those virtual machines are not automatically sometimes added to a policy depending on how you've set up the actual system. So customers want to understand what's not being protected because that's a risk. And we can also obviously toggle this view to present a different view of the information. Ultimately, we also show backup speeds, and we'll also show the protected versus unprotected in a nice colorful chart as well with percentages. Now, if I toggle back, these are hyperlinks, and this is really about simplicity. So customers don't want a complex solution anymore to actually navigate. They want simplicity, they want to see what's being protected, what's not being protected, and we simply obtain this by clicking on this hyperlink, which takes us to a report summary. And this report summary gives us charts based on the assets. We consider everything an asset within Unitrends. A virtual machine is an asset. A database is an asset. Yeah? Exchange, SQL, Oracle, they're assets, as well as a physical server is considered an asset. So once we integrate with our API or we deploy agents, those assets are presented in the inventory. And what we can see from this particular protection summary is the total number of assets we have, which is 159, And we can also see basically the number of assets that are not protected, which is 115, and the number of assets that are being protected. We also have the total assets copied. And this is relevant when you consider that you want to move data from the appliance, and we provide virtual appliances and physical appliances. Please go ahead.
What is the criteria to consider that it is protected or it is unprotected?
What is the criteria? So the criteria is it's in the backup policy and it's being backed up or protected.
Inside the backup policy?
Yeah, and it's being protected.
So you have an e-discovery product that tells you what is discovered, and you have a backup strategy, and you release twice to tell people, okay, with the backup, is it protected?
So that's a really good question, and that question talks to part of what Tony was trying to present, or what Tony was presenting with the VSA.
Yeah.
Because with the VSA, there are discovery tools which will discover the assets on or within your environment. At this moment in time, this product is only dealing with assets that you've actually added. Virtual infrastructure is a different ball. If you're integrating with VMware and you're talking to vCenter, you'll discover all the assets automatically. As an administrator adds an asset in the virtual infrastructure, the inventory gets updated, so you know that there's new assets. But if they're physical servers, you have to basically deploy an agent to protect a physical server. So if a physical server is introduced into the environment, essentially an agent is not deployed, we won't know about it in Unitrends, pure Unitrends. And this is where the VSA stuff comes in.
The elimination policy, so basically, also a state unmanaged that you don't have any policy on monitoring. Managed with policy compliance, and managed with something that the policy is not or customer does not work.
Okay, so you're asking me whether I have, or whether Unitrends has a policy or a method to discover assets within.
No, because here you are
Three conditions, yes.
what is protected and what is not protected.
Yes.
What is not protected, you are telling us that is something that does not have agent.
For physical servers, an agent needs to be deployed for us to determine that it's not protected, because we won't know about it.
Or for virtual machines, a virtual machine without any policy.
Precisely, yeah.
You're speaking about VMware or whatever, but all those pixels who you don't have any partnerships, so that is to say they can't give you information to say if it's not protected.
Yeah.
Those people are unprotected. It will cut for you.
Unless we're using the VSA product to discover those assets and then deploy agents and integrate with the Unitrends.
So we do have tools that will allow you to do that automated inventory and asset discovery on the network. We have tools that can discover endpoints, so it could be servers, it could be laptops, it could be desktops, it could be any form of intelligent endpoint.
Yeah.
We also have tools that can do network endpoints, so routers, switches, which are effectively dumb terminals as well.
But it's an option that you have to pay for. And you are speaking about
Unitrends.
not this option, they are speaking from
Precisely, from the Unitrends perspective, but
It would be
as a
two
company,
different-
we have
sorry,
that.
it would be two different policies that you would look for. So you would look at the assets on your network, but when you're setting a data protection policy, you want to protect the assets that you are using and the assets that you are not. So you have that list of assets that you create protection policies for, and that's what you will back up, be it a server, be it any other type, PC, laptop, tablet, whatever.
Yeah, and bear in mind we have a REST API as well. So that integration with regards to the Kaseya product that has to discover assets that we don't know about can use the REST API to add the assets and then they will present themselves here as unprotected. And this is specifically physical assets. For virtual infrastructure, we have no problems with that. Yeah? So if I just quickly move on to the pie chart here, we have total assets copied here as well. And this relates to, you've got the protected asset, or the asset that is protected, however, it's not being protected by a backup copy. And that's what we're presenting to you with the total assets copied. Yeah? The total backup is another pie chart, which basically is just giving you information about the success of the backups. So it relates to the assets, but the backups that are actually running for the assets. So we've got the assets that are protected, yeah, and the total backups is pie chart is telling us the success of the backups for those assets that are being protected. Make sense? And the backup copies copied, that's again success of the backup copies that are being created, that are being moved from the appliance to the cloud or to NAS storage or to public cloud. We're saying these are the successes of the backup that we're creating backup copies for. Please go ahead.
A very prosaic question. When we see the last examples of the ransomware attack, the problem was not purely only the ransomware. That's also the backups, which were ciphered.
Yeah.
And it means that how do you ensure that the solution, because as we see, it's 121 days or 76 days. It means that already my backup are embedding the ransomware. How do you manage to avoid this problem to your customers, which are, as you say, more generous and doesn't have resources to have this kind of team to manage every day scans, looking at the backup was done or whatever. Yeah. How do you manage that?
Yeah, I'll go to that next.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because it's easier to show you how that's. Yeah. Yeah. I'll go to that next. All I want to show you here is the point that we give you visibility to the assets that are being protected, not being protected, and the success of those backup and the backup copies. And what we also do is we have a table associated with each of these pie charts. And this table really allows our customers to drill down deeper into what's protected versus what's not protected. So the whole idea is to provide a solution that is easy to consume, easy to use. Yeah, that's part of the value. And what we see here is that we have a method to filter, which is essentially querying the database to say, okay, we have these asset types. And as you can see, we've got Windows 2012 here, Exchange, Hyper-V. If I wanted to look at just the VMware assets, I would just type in VMware in this filter. And it will present to me just the VMware assets. And we have a column that says protected. We have a column that says protected by a backup copy. And false obviously means it's not protected. Yeah, so we've gone from a dashboard, or a tile on a dashboard that gives us a numerical number. We've clicked on the hyperlink that's taken us to this report, which has given us that pie chart, and then we've scrolled down, and we're now looking at a table which represents the database, where we can drill in deeper to figure out, okay, what does my protection look like for my VMware or my Exchange? Is anything not being protected correctly? I expect this asset to have a backup copy. Does it have one? Yeah, and it's simple to do, and that's the key thing. Yeah, medium-sized businesses, small businesses, they as Tony said, they have multiple hats. So you need to take the complexity out of querying databases, writing SQL statements, and provide a simple filter that allows them to generate the data that they can review to ensure that they are compliant or address their compliance issues with regards to their assets. And that's what we're doing here.
It would be a nicer, more useful UI if that was a good enough. rather than type in guess what. How many assets types do they have?
Well, yeah, so there's VMware obviously, and there's the various Windows versions.
So what,
yeah.
a dozen maybe?
Oh, more than that.
Well,
yeah.
2 dozen?
Let's yeah.
Just pull down and then pick from the pull down.
Yeah, well, that's notable. Yeah, that's notable. Yeah, that makes sense. And obviously, you could say the false and the protected column should be a pull down as well. False or you know, yeah. No. Perfect. So again, we're showing when the last backup took place for any one of these given assets as well. So it's really easy to understand, and it's simplicity. So point taken, very good point. Should be a pull down list for these things. We do the same thing for the backup as well. And from the backup perspective, you can also see again that we're showing the backup types that we're running for each of the individual assets. So we're doing falls for exchange. Falls and incrementals, we do incrementals forever. So you know what type of backups are running for the assets that you're protecting. And we're obviously showing success, warnings, failures, when the last backup took place, again, when the next backup is going to take place, and what job/policy the asset is in. Very easy to see, very easy to consume. What you can also do is you can export this data into a CSV file. So if you want to create fancy pivot tables in Excel or reports, you can export this data and do with it, what you like, ultimately. So it's, again, simplicity, giving you visibility. If I go back to the dashboard and just cover off the recovery assurance side of things, which basically means me clicking on the preference, adding another tile. And now below I have a recovery assurance tile. So this recovery assurance tile basically does the RPO and RTO compliance check-in, and it shows us how our tests were run, whether they were successful or whether there were any warnings, etc. And it shows us our compliance in the pie chart. If I click on the hyperlink here, it takes me to a compliance report. And this is showing me that my RTO, my recovery time objective, is compliant because it's green. And it shows me my RPO is compliant, which is our recovery point objective, which is the time you have to go back to find the latest backup, is good. And our overall compliance is great because everything is green. Now, I'll show you, I'll walk you through that, yeah? So what we have here is the job that was run. We can see we've got a profile that has been defined, an RPO profile of 24 hours and an RTO profile of 30 minutes. So the actuals here, are here, and the defined are there and there. 6 minutes is the actual, 9 hours and 30 minutes is the actual for the RPO. If I click on this link, it shows me what I was actually testing. And I always talk to my customers about services, ultimately, and consider this a service. It's a 3-tiered architecture service. It's an AD server, SQL server, and web server. And we're testing this service as a whole, yeah? And we're testing each individual asset. So we're looking at the RPOs and RTOs of the recovery of each individual asset. And we're successful because we're meeting the RPOs and RTOs, hence why we have these nice green tick boxes. Okay, if I go to the test itself to show you how we test, I go back to the dashboard and I'll go down and I'll click on the recent test. It takes me to a recovery assurance report. And if I just randomly check or click on one of these reports, it shows us the steps we went through to check this particular service. Okay? What we're leveraging is something called instant recovery. So our appliances will present a data store from the appliance to virtual infrastructure. And we're going to leverage virtual infrastructure to spin up those workloads, to test those workloads. And what we're doing here is we're presenting 3 virtual machines to virtual infrastructure. We are then reconfiguring the virtual machines. So we have the capability to add memory, take away memory, or add CPU, take away CPU. We can change the name, we can re-IP, we can do lots of things with the actual testing process. So once we've actually changed the resources as appropriate, we will power on the virtual machine. And as you can see, we have the ability to honor boot order dependencies. So in this instance, we want AD to start first, yeah? And then we're going to start the web server and SQL server. Ideally, you'd have a third group here, which the web server would start third, but this is how this has been configured. What we can also do is test whether Active Directory is functioning. So we're not just spinning up a virtual machine and assuming the actual Active Directory is working, we're actually testing Active Directory, and it's inbuilt tests that we provide. So the customer doesn't have to write any scripts, it's all built in. So it's, again, simplicity. We will then basically... I will show you those as part of this process. So I'm just taking you through hopefully a logical movement. But clearly, as you can see here, and what this is showing you is that we are testing essentially the web server and SQL server. It's showing you that we can run multiple tests. It's not just a single test, so you can develop complex tests against your workloads. We are showing you that we can actually check an SQL instance, we can check a Windows service, any service that you like, multiple services. The customer knows exactly what is important to them, and we're giving them the tools to basically configure and, create a robust solution from a testing perspective. Once we've done the test, if they fail, we'll fail the test, and we'll provide an error message stating why the test was failed. And that basically means the user will go back and basically address the issue that has caused the test to fail. So if you think about this, customers, as Tony said, often don't do any testing because they don't have the time and resources. If you think about, if any of you have ever done disaster recovery in your life, a real disaster recovery test, or have had to recover in a system in real life, you'll find out that often it's the very small changes that make the process of recovery take a lot longer. That's the challenge. It's not the big things, it's the small things that get in the way. So if you're able to basically check your workloads, check your services, you're basically building more confidence in your capability to recover, be it on-premise or at a remote location, because we can do this test locally or we can do it remotely at another site, and we can also provide these types of tests within our cloud for our customers as well. I always like to say as well is that if customers are replicating to our cloud, they can also do this test locally, and that ensures from their perspective that the workloads they're replicating are good, because we're receiving data ultimately. Yeah, you want to be sure that the data that you're sending is good as well. You can't just assume. Most people think that, yeah, I've sent it to you, it's all going to be good. And you wait for the vendor to tell you it's not good. Yeah? We give you the capability to check for yourself, ultimately. So once we've done those tests, we will power off the virtual machine. We'll basically remove the virtual machines from virtual infrastructure, and we'll report on the RPO and RTO compliance by sending just reporting back into the reporting infrastructure, so the dashboard, the reports, emails, etc. So I've shown you a test. Now, if I go to the Protect tab and just show you how you ultimately, actually, before I do that, let's go to the reports. So we've done the test. For each test that we do, I'm going to generate a report. We have backup history. Okay. So what we'll actually send out as part of the reporting is an entry into the backup history for the recovery point. And if it's been successful, we will certify it as a successful recovery point. So you get visibility in the reporting infrastructure that the recovery point is successful. Yeah? This relates to ransomware as well. Yeah? So we have an at-risk column here, because if we figure an asset is at risk, we can actually tell you. And we'll also tell you within the alert section if we consider an asset at risk of ransomware. And we'll tell you the asset that you need to investigate. So we're detecting ransomware, because it's all about detection. We're not actually remediating the ransomware. Yeah, that's a key thing to know. It's all about detection. But if I quickly go to, so I've got 10 minutes, go to protect and show you how we create a backup copy job or recovery assurance copy job. So we simply go to data copy access. It's going to take just a little while. And basically, we will do this, do these operations on VMware, Hyper-V, or Windows replicas. So we can take a Windows physical server and create a virtual replica of this physical server and test the physical server as well as a virtual workload. So let's take VMware as an example. If I select the backups folder, the backup folder contains all of the backups for this local appliance. If this appliance was receiving replicated data from another appliance, that data would be held in the backup copies folder. So these operations that we're going to just run through can be done at the source or it can be done at the target. You just choose the appropriate folder and the data within that folder to operate on. Yeah? So if I just select a couple of virtual machines randomly, I can add these virtual machines to an inventory. These are the virtual machines that I am going to test. I will simply then select next, and this is all about simplicity. I have a lab profile I can choose from. So this is a lab profile we've created, and we've named the lab profiles RPO 24 hours and RTO 30 minutes. Just, it makes sense. Customers can name their lab profiles anything they want, bronze, silver, or gold. I always advocate for customers to classify their data such that they can actually apply the appropriate resources for their testing to the appropriate assets. So it's simple to create a new profile. You simply click Manage, and I can then add my profile. And the profile, you'll provide a name, and you'll detail the resources that you're going to leverage for your testing. And this little button here basically defines your RPO and RTO testing. So you will select the metric, the hours or minutes, as an example, and you'll define your RPO as 6 hours, and as an example, recovery time objective, as 20 minutes. Yeah, you'll save that, and that's the RPO and RTO that you're going to test against, ultimately. Now, I've just selected the profile, RPO 12 hours and RTO 30 minutes. I simply select Next, and this is where I get to automatically schedule the testing. So you can schedule the testing every day if you want, twice a week, hence why it's great to classify your services and your assets so you can actually have that. Every day I'm going to test this particular service because it's really critical to the business. This other service I only need to test twice a week. Yeah? And you simply schedule the testing here. Yeah? Hands off once you've defined the schedule. And you can also create a reoccurrence as well. So if I want to do a reoccurrence of every hour, I could do so for a particular asset or service. Once I've done that, I click Next. And I have the assets that I'm going to test against. And as you can see, the boot order is the same. They're going to be powered on. I have no credentials defined for basically testing anything within the virtual machines themselves. I'm going to use this host. I'm going to use this particular storage, this recovery network, this sandbox network, which is defined in the virtual infrastructure. And I have no re-IP. So we have the capability to re-IP. Yeah? So if you're replicating data from site A to site B, and it's a different subnet, you can actually re-IP the actual virtual machines to run with the correct IP addresses and network settings as you require, right? Which is really important as well. Now, if I want to edit any of these attributes, I simply click the pencil, and I can change the name. It tells me what operating system I'm dealing with. I can change the boot order. I can basically reconfigure CPU and memory by clicking on that box to add or take away CPU and memory. And bear in mind, you may have a relationship where you have a passive disaster recovery site which has limited resources, so you can actually tune the services to run with the right resources at the DR site. Yeah? Now, credentials, I can select credentials that I want to leverage for testing, ultimately, and then I can go to location. So if you have a complex storage infrastructure, as an example, you could choose the type of data store you wish to run the virtual machine on. So if it's a database and you want to use SSDs, you can choose SSDs for that particular database. It's up to you. And you can choose the network settings as well, the network you wish to run the virtual machine on. So a lot of flexibility. Re-IP gives you the capability to re-IP the virtual machine. You put the adapter name in, IP address, subnet, DNS settings, and you're ready to go. Now, if I go to test, this answers the question around test. If I click on test, click add, you can see basically we have the ability to run custom scripts. So if you have bespoke applications, you can write a custom script, we're going to call it, the return code, etc., and we'll verify whether the test has been successful or not. We have malware scanning. Tony mentioned that we have Plan AV, which is an open source malware product built into the appliance. Again, think about the customer base with mid and SMB. It's perfect for them. We can do off-host scanning. So if you've got that sensitive application that you can't malware test while it's in production, we can actually do the testing in a sandboxed environment. And we'll obviously report back into that reporting infrastructure to say certified, it's good, free from malware. Yeah?
Wait, how much of this can be derived from an API?
I believe most of it, if not all.
Right, so if I was building out an environment where I, on demand, built out a virtual machine and then wanted to go and put the backup in place, test the backup, test the process of the backup and restore it, I could do that all through your API?
REST API, yeah. Should be able to, yeah. We can verify that for you, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So Exchange 2016 testing, Exchange 2013 testing, we have the ability to run SQL queries against a database. So I could just say select Tony from the employee database. I put Tony in the expected output. When the test runs, essentially if Tony's returned, we know the database is up and running and it's functional. So this is about proof in the pudding. Yeah? This is about automated testing, taking the pain out of doing this manual process. And clearly, we have lots of other features: ping, check Windows services, and basically domain, Active Directory, etc. So once you've created the backup job, I'm going to finish off because we've got literally 2 minutes. You end up with a backup job within the jobs folder. And this backup job is called a data copy access job. And I can actually also run a manual test, which basically spins up the workload, tests it according to what you've defined, and then tears down the workload and reports back into the infrastructure. I also have the capability to run an instant lab, which basically means I'm going to spin up that service in a sandboxed environment, and I can do patch testing. So I can test the service, patch it, before I actually patch the production workload. So this is about reuse of the data within the appliance without having to, copy data around the place to do testing. Yeah, it speeds up the process of patch testing, reporting, etc. So we're providing you with a test and dev environment by utilizing the appliance data. And the failover is a one-click failover process. So that service has died. I need to recover that service. You just click failover and it recovers the entire service that has been defined in the job, which I showed you, which would be that 3-tiered service. So I'm going to stop there because we've run out of time. But hopefully that's made sense, and hopefully I've answered your question around how we do the testing and the RPOs.